When we think of a former president of the United States, what is the first image that comes to mind? You probably think of giant mansions with golden gates, private jets that fly all over the world, and millions of dollars sitting in the bank. For most modern presidents, leaving the White House is the start of a massive business empire. They give speeches for hundreds of thousands of dollars, they sign deals with big movie companies, and they live lives of extreme luxury. But there is one man who broke all those rules. Jimmy Carter, the 39th president, lived a life that was so different from other world leaders that it almost seems impossible. While other presidents were busy becoming billionaires, Jimmy Carter was often seen shopping at the local dollar store in his tiny hometown. Today, we are looking at the bank account and the lifestyle of a man who many call the humblest president in history. We are going to find out exactly how much money he left behind and why he chose to live the way he did. Make sure you stay with us until the very end of this video, because the actual amount of his net worth is not what you think, and the reason he gave so much of it away will change your perspective on what it means to be truly rich. To understand the money Jimmy Carter left behind, we first have to look at where he came from. He wasn't born into a family of kings or bankers. He was a peanut farmer from a tiny town called Plains, Georgia. His family worked hard for everything they had, and Jimmy learned the value of a dollar before he could even drive a car. He went to the Naval Academy and served his country, but when his father passed away, he went back to the farm to save the family business. This farmer's heart stayed with him even when he reached the highest office in the land. When he became president in 1977, he didn't care about the fancy parties or the expensive suits. He was the man who walked down the street during his inauguration instead of riding in a bulletproof car. This simple way of thinking would define how he handled his money for the rest of his life. But life wasn't always easy for Jimmy Carter, especially when it came to his finances. Many people don't know this, but when Jimmy Carter left the White House in 1981, he was actually in a lot of trouble. While he was president, he put his family peanut farm into a blind trust to make sure there was no conflict of interest. He wanted to be honest and fair. But while he was busy running the country, the farm was not doing well. When he moved back to Georgia after losing the election, he discovered that his business was over $1 million in debt. Think about that for a second. He was a former president of the United States, and he was nearly broke. Most people in that position would have panicked or tried to sell their name to the highest bidder, but Jimmy had a different plan. He didn't want to work for a big bank or sit on the board of a giant company just for a paycheck. He decided that the best way to pay off his debt and take care of his family was to pick up a pen. Jimmy Carter became a writer. Over the next 40 years, he wrote over 30 books. He wrote about everything: his life in the White House, his faith, his thoughts on world peace, and even a book of poetry. These books became very popular, and they were the main reason he was able to pay off his million-dollar debt and start building a life of comfort. But even as the money from the book deals started to come in, Jimmy and his wife, Rosalind, made a choice that shocked everyone in Washington. They decided they didn't want a mansion. Instead of moving to a fancy neighborhood in Atlanta or a beach house in Florida, they went right back to the house they had built in 1961 in Plains, Georgia. This house is famous because it is so incredibly normal. It is a one-story ranch-style home with 2 bedrooms. Before he passed away, it was valued at only about $167,000. To put that in perspective, that is less than the price of the armored cars the Secret Service used to protect him. While other former presidents were spending millions on giant estates, Jimmy was happy in the same house he had lived in before he was ever famous. He liked his small kitchen, his simple yard, and his quiet neighbors. This choice alone saved him millions of dollars over his lifetime, but it also showed the world what he truly valued. Stay with us, because we are getting into the specific numbers of his income and how he managed his presidential pension. Every former president gets a pension from the government, which is about $210,000 a year. On top of that, they get money for travel and an office. Most former presidents use every cent of this, and then some. But Jimmy Carter was known for being very careful with taxpayer money. He flew on regular commercial planes for a long time instead of private jets. He didn't have a giant staff of people waiting on him. He and Rosalind did their own grocery shopping. In fact, people in planes would often see the former president of the United States walking down the aisle of a Dollar General to pick up paper towels or milk. He didn't do this because he was poor. He did it because he didn't see the point in wasting money. This brings us to a major hook in our story. Why didn't he make money like the others? If you look at Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, they make millions of dollars every year just by giving speeches. A single one-hour speech for a former president can pay as much as $400,000. If Jimmy Carter had wanted to, he could have been a billionaire. He was invited to speak all over the world. But he almost always said no to the big paydays. He felt that it was indecent to use the office of the presidency to get rich. He believed that the job was a service to the country, not a way to fill a bank account. Because of this moral choice, his net worth stayed much lower than the men who came after him. But while his bank account was smaller, his reputation for honesty and kindness grew larger every year. So how much money did he actually have? Experts who study the finances of famous people estimate that at the time of his passing, Jimmy Carter's net worth was around $10 million. Now, to most of us, $10 million sounds like a huge amount of money.
And it is.
But when you compare it to the hundreds of millions that other former presidents have, it is actually quite small. Almost all of that $10 million came from his hard work as an author. He was a very successful businessman in his own way, but he just didn't spend the money on himself. He didn't have a car collection, he didn't have a jewelry collection, and he didn't have a collection of expensive art. He had his books, his farm, and his family. But wait, there is more to the story of his money than just what was in his bank account. We have to talk about what he did with the money he earned. Jimmy Carter was one of the most generous people to ever live in the White House. He and Rosalind started the Carter Center, a group dedicated to fighting disease and promoting peace all over the world. A huge portion of the money he made from his books and his speaking went directly into the center. He didn't just give his name to the charity, he gave his time and his own money. He was also famous for his work with Habitat for Humanity. For decades, even when he was in his 90s, Jimmy could be seen wearing a tool belt and holding a hammer, building houses for people who didn't have a home. He didn't get paid for this. He did it because he believed that true wealth is what you do for others. As Jimmy Carter reached his final years and entered hospice care, the world started to look at his life and his estate more closely. People wondered what would happen to his money and his home. In his will, Jimmy made sure that his children and grandchildren would be taken care of, but he also made sure that his legacy of giving would continue. He wanted his home in Plains to eventually become a part of the National Park Service so that people could visit and see how a president really lived. He didn't want a monument to his wealth. He wanted a monument to his simple life. This is perhaps the greatest gift he left behind, the lesson that you don't need a lot of things to be happy. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the life and finances of Jimmy Carter. It is a story that reminds us all that money is just a tool, and it's how we use that tool that defines who we are. Jimmy Carter used his tool to build a better world, and that is why his story is so inspiring. We hope this video gave you a new way of looking at what it means to be successful. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more about the real lives of the people who shaped our history, make sure to keep exploring our content. There are so many more stories of truth and inspiration waiting to be told. Until next time, stay curious and remember that the best things in life aren't things at all.